before, I think you had a great question, and Amit is the right person to answer that question, and I'll just introduce all of you to him. So today's leaders are deluged by a lifetime's worth of advice on cloud, emerging technologies, what to do, what not to do, right? How in the room are you going to figure it out, right? And where should you be focusing your limited time and energy and resources, and with the great reset, employees leaving, joining, all of this confusion, how do you figure this out, right? So it's exactly what Amit will talk to us about. So let's hear from him. He's our head of training and certification for India and South Asia, and he will talk to us about India skills dynamics and market conditions. Welcome, Amit.
So again, thanks for coming. Just a show of hands in terms of to get a mix of how many from HR here? Very nice. How many from tech? Is the balance tech? Okay, awesome. So it's like a good 50-50 mix. So what I'll do is I'll share with you, what I will share is just some best practices and some learnings and feelings from our customers who have moved on this journey. And more often than not, we realize the convergence of HR and tech in many places seems to be misaligned. And I think we are trying to solve that puzzle of getting HR and tech and business together to solve the skill problem, because what will happen is if you don't solve the skill problem now and have a partner do it, at some point in time, it will come in the way of scaling the business. So one of the things we realize is, and that's why we've kind of got a mix of HR and tech here. So very quickly, what I'm going to do is, I'll share with you the findings of the digital landscape. We did a survey with 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗔. Every year we do this. This year we surveyed about 2,000 respondents, 300 organizations and 1,000 IT folks and HR folks. So I'll just share a glimpse of that. I'll give you a view of how we're looking at talent gap and how our customers are looking at solving some of the issues that you raised. Again, by no means arrived there, but work in progress, and see if we can learn from you as to how you're solving it, and we can share. And then our perspective as to how we are trying to solve this problem. So the first off, on the digital research, I think the first thing that comes very clearly is that the pandemic has accelerated adoption of digitization and cloud per se as a model to deliver that. So about 95% of the respondents actually said, and these are workers who say, listen, we need more digital skills because organizations are asking us. And guess what? The issue is you suddenly can't acquire digital skills overnight. And that was the challenge that most of the organizations face. So there are about 4.6 million IT BPM workers. There are about 2 million students who are taught curriculum which is not industry ready. So tomorrow your business comes and asks you to deliver cloud, what do you do? So clearly the first talent pool and the largest talent pool is upskilling. But guess what? How do you take people out from an 8-hour job and train them, because they won't sit through 8-hour classes, 3-day 8-hour classes. And then even if you train them, do you have projects that can be deployed now? But because guess what? You trained them, but you didn't give them any projects and the learning actually got wasted. So some real issues around solving for this. The second was around, so digital skills are required, and does it do anything to productivity? Absolutely yes. So vehemently the organizations came back and said, listen, when we do give digital skills to our employees, the productivity goes up. So 91% said productivity goes up. Now the question is, what are the kind of digital skills that are required? And you would have heard NASSCOM Future Skills Prime, you would have heard some big AI for all initiatives from NITI Aayog. So India is betting big. $1 trillion digital economy will probably be reached earlier than the $5 trillion digital goal. That got shifted to by 2000, by 2 years because of the pandemic. But I certainly believe that the $1 trillion goal will be achieved faster. We're probably in the 600 billion range, 600, 700 billion range. We'll probably attain that faster. So what are the digital skills? Guess what? The top 6 skills, 4 skills are cloud related. So whether it is cloud architecting and design, whether it is AI, ML, whether it is data, 4 out of top skills are cloud related because that's the best way to scale the business. And you've seen that across the businesses that you deal with as consumers, whether it is EdTech, whether it is Hotstar, you're watching the FIFA football game right now, or you're ordering on Swiggy, all of that is actually accelerated, and therefore is cloud related. All those businesses are on the cloud. But workers aren't getting trained fast enough, and that's the challenge. And the challenge really stems from lack of time. So 46% of the workers say that they are not able to get trained faster, and clearly lack of time came up as one of the top inhibitors. So how do you solve for that? Because the traditional mode of training, of getting them into a class, 8-hour class, 3 days, is not working. You need to have a blended environment of learning. You can't give it all virtual because many of our customers, guess what? they actually took licenses, online licenses from large companies. But when they looked at the efficacy of that training, that didn't work, because guess what? You can't become 𝗧𝗵𝗃 𝗏𝗏𝗃 by watching him on YouTube alone, right? There's an element of instructor-led and hands-on lab that you need to blend. So most of the customers who just said, okay, here are the licenses of, let's say, Simplilearn or Pluralsight or this thing, go figure, that didn't work for them, because that was not effective when it comes to actually tinkering on the console. 27.3 million will need digital skills just next year alone. And when these digital skills are, there are a broad spectrum of skills. Of course, cloud related and data related are going to be relatively less percentage of that, but 27.3 million people or workers, which represent about 7% of India's workforce. Guess where Indonesia is? That's the fastest growing digitalization economy. About 13% of Indonesia's workforce is going to be digitally skilled. So India, so the thing is, we have the demographic dividend, but why is that demographic dividend not coming to bear? It's because of how our education system is designed and how we're being taught, something that the new education policy is trying to fix, but that's Indonesia and India for you, 7% versus 13%. And then 97% of the workers face barriers to digital skill. So those were some of the learnings. And when we look at why cloud matters, I think it clearly matters, because that's how you're going to accelerate the digitalization. You're not going to be spending a ton of money on data centers anymore, because that model will simply not scale. Anybody watching FIFA? Do you see the buffering and all of that? It's because we're trying to solve, some of the players they're actually trying to solve them from on-prem data centers. Anybody saw IPL on 𝗏𝗏star? That works beautiful. At IPL 𝗏𝗏star, we touched about 22 million concurrent users, and the system didn't, because 𝗏𝗏star chose to be on a cloud and scale that out separately. So increasingly, you can't scale the numbers. The problem of India is going to be solved by population grade. It's going to be solved at scale, and that's not going to be solved from on-prem data centers. And then, so we talked about, so 8% of India's GDP potentially contributing to 14 million jobs, and out of the 14 million jobs, so you see direct and indirect employment. So I'll just give you an example. We just launched a Hyderabad region yesterday. We're going to be putting in about $4.4 billion till 2030. That's going to contribute to about 6.3 billion GDP by 2030. 48,000 job employment. So there's a correlation of investments to job-related opportunities to impact on GDP. And that's why the Hyderabad region is a very critical step for us, in addition to the Bombay region that we already have. So what is it that the customers are facing? And you'll kind of relate to some of this. So clearly attrition is an issue. Attrition and retention are two issues. So if the new hires have 3 offers and the acceptance rate of offers is dipping, and that's a big HR problem. Number of people having offers, the developer, I've had examples of someone who left the company because laid off in pandemic. Developer was at 6.6 lakhs, was called back at 12 lakhs, at which point she said, I've already done a project, give me 21 lakhs, here's the offer. And I hear that story across large IT companies, I hear that story across smaller companies. So the issue is, that's the size of the market, and there's wage inflation. So, and then there's obviously retention of existing this thing. So when we looked at and spoke to some of the developers in the developer community, do you know what excites a developer to stay, at least the new age developers? What really excites them to stay is the tech stack that the company has. And you won't think about this. HR won't necessarily think about, listen, does the tech stack really important? So tech stack that the company has is the number one thing that excites the developer to come to your company, and then the projects that you provide and the career progression that you provide is the second one. So the big question then for companies is, at least traditional companies, so why did attrition happen? Attrition happened because a lot of startups were coming. So people moved by the droves from traditional IT companies to startups. But guess what? We see some correction happening in the startup. We've seen the funding winter. We see people getting laid off. So there'll be some correction, but we're still looking at double-digit inflation. If not 23, 25%, but we're still looking at about 15 to 20 points of attrition. Now the question is, how do you solve for that? Now, different companies have done different things. So one, there's a strategic intention to hire from tier 3, tier 2 cities and colleges. There's a strategic intent to go to those colleges because those colleges don't have the plethora of offers that the tier 1 college or the cities have. You would have seen 𝗏𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗃's interview recently. He said, I want to go to tier 2, tier 3 city because guess what? I can deliver work from anywhere. Why should I be bound to tier 1 cities? So there's this whole issue of going to tier 2, tier 3. there's increasingly a question coming to us since we run diversity initiatives. Listen, can we get women who have gone back from sabbatical, who want to come back, people who want to start second innings, because they feel that that workforce will be far more loyal and they will just not jump jobs because of offers. So increasingly, we have people coming to us asking for diversity hiring, people coming to us for non-tech backgrounds. A lot of hotel industry people got laid off. They had no tech background. They want to come from non-tech to tech. We are running a program and we see a lot of people expressing interest in recruiting from those cohorts. The other thing that people do is they market themselves very well in the virtual job fairs and package the tech stack very nicely. Some people say, listen, we're going to just hire for full stack developers. But guess what? Just saying that we need full stack developers is not enough. Telling them what you do in your business, link it to serverless, AI/ML, the new technologies, the cool stuff that you're going to do in your business is going to attract them. So when you do go out to campuses, we have seen best practices of companies saying, really packaging and saying that, listen, this is the best thing that happened to mankind. This is what we're doing in our business and therefore you should come. And at that point, the discussion necessarily not a lakh or 2 lakh that you'll give them, but just the opportunity to learn that becomes really important. So the other thing that we see people doing very well is new hires. So when they come, can you put them through a new hire program and can you give them progression? So certifications are linked to career progression. There's linkages to you do certain things, you get to certain outcomes and we link it to you and your performance appraisal system. There's this thing about to certify and not to certify. If we certify, they leave. But guess what? If you don't certify, then their market value obviously decreases. They will go ahead and get that certification. But then the question is, can you certify them and can you give them interesting projects? Can you, for instance, create an incubation factory or an innovation factory where they can tinker with stuff? And that's what we see. Does that reduce the attrition? It does. But does it still get to low single digits? Answer is no. So which means that from a hiring and talent acquisition standpoint, you probably still need to factor 7-8 points of attrition, and therefore you look at the hiring stack accordingly. So we work with campus hiring teams, we work with diversity teams, we work with teams who are also looking at, let's say, veterans or this thing, and we realize these are some of the things that some large companies are doing, or even the smaller companies are doing to interact. The other is hybrid learning. So you do need to give people some self-paced content, but that self-paced content needs to have hands-on lab. Therefore, if you do choose an online provider, see what's the hand-on lab capability. Is there gamification of content? Is that exciting and interesting? You want to blend that, and then for doubts, you either need to have a community where people can ask questions, or you need to then take them through a classroom environment, because then it's more topical, it makes sense. And then you can't have an online license forever. It is not for perpetuity. So you need to put together a time frame into which they actually confirm. So increasingly, all of you have LMS systems. So when you trigger off learning plans from within your LMS systems, we have seen best practices where they say, okay, this is to be done by this time. This will lead to this, and you need to choose your learning path. So online, instructor-led class, exam readiness, workshop, certification, outcome, this is linked to your appraisal system. These are some best practices that we have seen. Blending. So we changed. We moved from 3-day classes to 5-day classes, and we changed some of our modalities. We kind of added our AWS Skill Builder. Diversity inclusion, we talked about. So we've got an initiative called 𝗵𝗲𝗁 and 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗏. We get women who have taken sabbatical, who want to come back to work. We train them. It's a 12-week intense program, 9 to 5. They're ready for a job interview. We actually help 50 women placed across about 10 odd partners and customers. And likewise, we're now taking non-tech cohorts and putting that. So right now, we're moving about 3,000 students through a 12-week intensive program from diverse backgrounds and offering them to your potential job opportunities. And then the other thing is aligning to outcomes. Any learning which is not aligned, one of the things we also learned is when you open up upskilling, a lot of people just want to come to the class. But guess what? That doesn't make sense, because having a developer also do cloud architecting, or having a cloud architecting also do AI/ML sitting in that class doesn't make sense. So what you need to think through is what is your structure in the cloud world vis-a-vis the on-prem world? Believe me, mapping that job roles is very critical. We see that mental construct with our customers at times missing who are starting the journey. In the on-prem world, you'll have a network, a compute, a storage, a security guy. In the on-prem, in the cloud world, you'll probably have a cloud architect who could do all of that. You could have, so you will have to think about jobs, and therefore you will have to think about which cohorts are going to go through which training. Otherwise, if you move everybody through the same, people will come and learn, but they will not have any job projects to tinker with data. So think about learning outcomes, and those are some best practices that we have seen. And the new education policy actually allows that. So our goal is to really help builders, innovate on AWS cloud. And last 5 years, we've trained about 3 million individuals. And how do we do that? We actually take a 3-point approach. The first is the people and culture at the center. And here we are saying there's a me, we, and community. What does it mean for the learner? What does it do to his career? How are you tracking it? What does it mean to a developer team? So if you are chasing a minimum time to get a minimum viable product out, how are you collaborating, and what are the skill sets? Are you doing hackathons? Are you doing game-thons? Are you doing test days to figure out? And then the community. So what happens is, when you are in large corporations, people would have gone through learning curves. One team must be ahead of the curve. They would have faced a set of solutions or problems. They would have solved it. Rather than everyone else having to figure that out, have a community that people can go to. In the cloud world, there's nothing called once and done. You have to have a perpetual learning environment, because it's like Lego blocks. You will take one service, you will start with compute, you will add storage, you will add containers, it just keeps growing. Therefore, you need to have a perpetual learning environment. Therefore, community becomes important. The second is, we talked about audience-specific engagement, and then the cross-business alignment becomes very critical. We can't randomize this. Business needs something, HR needs to be having a seat, talent acquisition needs to be having a seat, and likewise tech needs to be having a seat, and that alignment becomes very critical. So I think one of the things we do very well, some of the customers who start, they do what we call a learning need analysis. Listen, basis the business outcomes that we want to achieve in next 3 years, how many builders in seats do we need? What is the complexion of that? What are the critical skills we need, and what are critical skills? Let's say you need to work on Kubernetes. That's a critical skill. You have people in the market you can recruit for Kubernetes. How many people do we need of that flavor? So that's critical skills. But guess what? You have scarce skills. AI, ML, data scientists, those are scarce skills. Number of people recruitable from the market are less. Now, God bless you if your business sits in the intersection of that, because you're really trying to solve 2 dimensions of the problem. So what a learning need analysis helps you to do, what the business needs, and that's where talent acquisition becomes critical. That's where they need to be at the table. What the business needs, what's the kind of profiles you need to recruit for, and then recruit for them, and what are the critical skills and scarce skills, and therefore what's the risk to the business, so that the business knows that they can't launch something in 6 months' time, because guess what, you don't have people to back that up. And then I think the best practice model that we have seen, and this is an example. So one, have cloud fluency as the common currency, which means everybody knows, listen, this is a business problem that I may encounter. So let's say the business in IPL team is probably going to run 30 million concurrent users. They know what the problem is. Hey, listen, can we go to the cloud? So there's a currency in the environment which is called cloud currency. People are cloud fluent. They may not be necessarily tech, but they are cloud fluent. Listen, can we do this in the cloud? Can it be faster in the cloud? Think like that. So there's a upskilling of existing IT talent within that. And again, I think the best practice there is look at the roles, look at who needs to go, look at what is the time that they need to have in tinkering with the project so that learning is fresh and can be implemented, and kind of go through that career progression story with them. So have a cloud or a digital academy, and then have a digital, and that academy keeps the engine humming and drumming in terms of your talent pool. And by the way, then you have a digital innovation lab which is actually feeding your future projects, because that will keep the developers interested. And then finally, there's executive education. We need to educate the CISOs, we need to educate the CEOs, we need to educate the line of business. And guess what? Some of us are in the business for 30 years. Technology refreshes, we are like 230 plus services. I mean, we just can't keep track of the technology changes. So the CIOs and CTOs need to be refreshed as well. So how do we at least get them in the latest environment? And this is what a typical best practice example looks like. So you can do a basic kickoff in your, listen, what's the basic kickoff? What can cloud do? What are the cloud financial goals? Why is it not only cost? Why should you look at agility? Then what you could do is you could do some formal training with a, let's say, set of people. The best practice is when you start with the cloud, we will have our ProServe and migrations team help you move one workload. So your team will tag team with our team. But guess what? So ProServe will do a project, CSM will also get involved. They'll get you to one place. But guess what? Your team needs to tag team. Then there'll be then there'll be some training that will happen. So the training will get. Then another project ProServe will tag team. And after the second iteration, your team should be able to take care of it. So someone asked the question, how does it happen? So initially you tag team with us, we do in-skilling, we do testing, and then we actually perpetuate that. So that's how it works. So in this case, for instance, do a jam. Come and do we actually do a contest between teams. Hey, listen, you think you have cloud skills? Here are those 5 different use cases. Let's develop. Let's do a jam. We call it a jam or gamification. We could do deep dive and do context work. And then obviously we could do certification accelerators where we can learn and exam readiness and certifications which we can actually do delivery. So that's what we do. Our focus is how we do it, building the talent pool of the future. So we work with academies. So if we have like 400 academies, institutions that we work with. If you have colleges that you work with, we can go sign them up. But chances are some of those colleges may already be with us. So we have an academy program. People can, what we do is these academy program pass-outs, we connect to potential job opportunities. So we've placed about 3,000 of them in the last 1 year alone. We upskill the existing talent pool. Here is where we have AWS Skill Builder, which is an online offering which you can blend with offline courses. There are about 12 industrial certifications now. And then you have AWS Restart, which is that 12-week program that we talked about, and 𝗏𝗃, which is that diversity program. So we kind of tie this all together, and at any point in time, we will work with colleges, we will do campus recruitment drives, we do virtual job fairs, and we will work with you. Listen, we also have interesting models called source, train, deploy. So let's say you say we need 300 developers to do our business in, let's say, 6 months' time or a year's time. Our training partners will actually onboard these people, train them. It's like talent pipeline as a service. So that's a possibility that you can look at. And these are some examples that we talked about. 𝗶𝗏 you already looked at. So clearly, skilling pays, reducing your production development time by half, or TCS, which actually has a bimodal approach of training new talent and existing talent. And then Tech Mahindra and Capgemini are companies who are working with us on promoting these different restart cohorts. So I would say that's kind of how we are working. But I'll pause and see if you have any questions. I know we're a little over time, but happy to take questions. And these are some of the learnings that we have, and see if this resonates with you or if you have a different perspective. Yes.
Hi, Mike, this is a comment and a question. Comment is that excellent stuff. I think you're doing what India needs to do right now. So I was in one of the other, similar kind of, last week I attended this, and they were talking about Industry 4.0, which is nothing but what you're talking about. And it was about manufacturing, smart manufacturing, and how do machine learning, AI help in better manufacturing. So they were referring to, are we losing jobs? So right from the first industrial revolution, it took 90 years to reset, and nobody left jobs. There was always a reset, and some of the jobs came up. So similarly, it's happening right now in India. So it has moved from a manufacturing to agriculture industry, services industry, and economy also is going that way. So my question is, these companies, the tech companies like the Twitters or the Facebook, or to some extent we do respect Amazon also, they hire people in great numbers. They go to campuses literally in trucks, right? And they pay the minimum amount to the newly graduated engineers. But why don't they upskill at home? Because charity begins at home, right? And why is there huge attrition in those companies? And when there is a downtime, the first companies to fire people are these, and we have seen it recently also. So what is AWS or Amazon as an organization doing to build that gap in-house before we do it, in the industry?
So listen, upskilling. So one, obviously, every layoff decision or is linked to a business cycle. So most companies, for instance, looked at building fulfillment centers. We thought the e-commerce boom will continue. So any layoff is linked to a business strategy, and unfortunately, that's a collateral damage of a business downturn. And I think companies do what they do best, which is to solve for profit. Now, what we do at our end is, at least we ensure that people we hire, every new hire, for instance, need to be cloud practitioner certified. Every solution architect or CSM or some of these people, we kind of put them through an internal certification process. There's a embark plan for 3 months, and as one of the requirements of the embark plan, they need to scale. Now, just like you, we have developers, and so our developer and engineering teams will probably do the same things that I just advocated to you. That they'll be going. We can't hire AI ML skills because guess what? Those are scarce skills. So we go ahead and pick up a bunch of cohorts and train them. So what we are actually teaching to you is what we are practicing internally. Because to be honest, it's the same developer talent pool, right? 2 million STEM students, 4.7 million IT BPM workers. That's the talent pool. So we kind of take the same principles and apply it in our embark journeys, and our it's linked to progression of careers. All of that we do. Yeah.
For a long time now. My question was, I understand the kind of end game that you've created for techies when it comes to upskilling them on cloud, but most of my work is with people who are, for the lack of a better term, I'll call them digital no voices or digitally illiterate people who've been in the industry for a long time, but 15-20 years, with a particular skill set. So what is the kind of end game you have for such people when it comes to training them, upskilling them on, because it is required. I mean, we are living in a world where cloud and these technologies like Industry 4.0 will be the norm 5 years down the line. So what is the kind of programs and the kind of shape you create for people who don't come from a digital or a tech background?
So one is the AWS Restart program, just fits there. So it's for non-tech backgrounds. So the 12-week curriculum has IT fundamentals, AWS fundamentals, cloud finishing skills, and certification. So one is that. The other is for the C-suite, which probably is not tech suite. We do things like cloud financial management. What the basics of cloud, what does it make sense? We'll do a 1.0 for a CFO, for instance, in doing that. We'll go and talk to a CIO and talk about case studies which are relevant to him, I won't go to a CIO necessarily while we talk about services, but I'll go and talk about business impact. So what we do is we create business line engagements and custom engagements for them. So there's a programmatic long-term engagement in the form of AWS Restart, which is a free program which we fund actually. For the other C-suite, it's a more bespoke customer program. Or working with we're trying to work with a business school, create a certification program around for execs. So those are some areas that we're looking at. We'll do a custom program. Because each organization has a different currency and where they are at that level.
Hi, Amit. Hi, good evening. I'm Meena from 𝗏𝗏𝗃. AI speech analytics. So that's a great stuff in what all you do in digital skilling. India as a global perspective. One of the things what I observed is on the diversity, right? Women into upskilling, women into AWS. So as an organization, do you provide any kind of support if I'm hiring or upskilling women forces? Is there a different kind of program which you can offer? Right? Yeah. The second one is, maybe I'll complete the second one around the question asked by both of them. I'm currently into one of the programs where I'm migrating kind of lift and shift from my couple of apps from the data center, right, to this. The challenge here is training those people who come from the data center mindset for over 20 years. So from your experience, do you have some data statistic to show how long it takes if they go through training? Let's assume that they are interested, they are going through the training before they could be productive enough. Currently, I have the mix of AWS consultants who are experts helping this, but I cannot afford to have both, right? So how long it would take for those data center mindset people to be productive on their own with the right kind of training? And the first question, is there any support for the organization?
So on the first one, we have this community called the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 community. where we have women who are running through the AWS restart cohorts. At the end of those cohorts, we have kind of absorbed 2 of them in our team itself. So those cohorts we can link up to you. So net to help you with diversity, we have these cohorts running, and we can connect you, and you can hire from this pool. So that's an immediate opportunity. On the second one, any move to the cloud is a culture change and a mindset change, and it can at times borderline on politics as well, because people have created whole organizations around a 3-tier structure. So and we've seen this play out many times. Net, I would say 3 to 6 months is when we should be, at least in our framework, ready to get these people aligned, at least minimum 3 to 6 months, and get them over the line and tell them how their jobs will change. They should not feel that cloud will take away the job. They should feel that they'll be able to do more with the cloud. I think that education we need to do to get past the mindset. And the other is in terms of training. If you're doing a lift and shift, I hope and if it is on AWS, I hope there's a ProServe and a migrations team involved. So getting people trained during that cycle will accelerate it.